Jesus told this parable. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger son said to his father, "Father, give me the share of the property that will be mine." So he divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all that was his and traveled to a distant country. And there, he squandered his property in reckless living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout that country, and he began to be in need. So he hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He gladly would have fed himself with the pods the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare, while here I am dying of hunger? I will go to my father and I'll say, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran to him and threw his arms around him and kissed him. And the son said, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' 'Quick, bring out a robe,' the father said to his servants, 'and put the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet, and go get the fatted calf and kill it, and let's eat and celebrate, because this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and has been found.' And they began to celebrate. The older brother was in the field, and when he approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the servants to ask what was going on. The servant answered him, 'Your brother has come back, and your father has killed the fatted calf because he's got him back safe and sound.' Then he became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him. But the elder son said to his father, 'Listen, all these years I have been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command. And yet you have never given me even a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, comes back, you killed the fatted calf for him.' His father said, 'Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found.'" And the story stops there until we finish it. Listen for what the Spirit is saying to us.
Thank you, Jane. And so let us finish it, or at least extend it. There's no way to finish a story like that. Thank you so much, Gene. If you've enjoyed the incredible music and the storytelling we've heard today, invite a friend. We have amazing worship experiences thanks to so many here in our congregation. So many. Do you relate more to the older brother or the younger brother? Regardless of family order, gender, who do you relate to? I imagine, well, let's see what I imagine. Let's go to God now in prayer. So many of us, oh God, know well the hymn, "There's a wideness in God's mercy." But what we may not know is the third verse, not found in our hymnal, that begins in this way. But we make God's love too narrow by false limits of our own, and we magnify God's strictness with the zeal he will not own. May our boundaries, any boundaries and limits and zeal that testify not to you, be gently laid aside these few precious moments ahead as we contemplate the good, challenging, prodigal news you, through Jean, have laid before us today. Amen. A Minneapolis newspaper article reports that person for person, Minnesotans use the Apple digital assistant Siri less than any other state in the union. Did you know that? And in the comments section at the bottom of the article, someone wrote, "Because we don't want to bother her." So Minnesotan. We who are the older brother, quote unquote, in the story of the prodigal, older in fact or in deed, so often we do not want to bother others. Bothering others to help us because why should we need it? We who are expected to be big and smart and strong all along. We can do it on our own, thank you very much. Ask which aisle to find something. Read all the instructions. And who needs Siri anyhow? I exaggerate, of course. And yet, help can be a hard word for many of us to utter. Many of us who are church folk who may identify more with the older brother than the younger one in today's story. In fact, or indeed. Help means we may not know when we may feel we are expected to know. Expected to carry life's playbook in our pocket, purse, or to have it on our bedstand, the playbook of what to do next. And I need to find out what to say next. There we go. Asking for help can imply us that we are not living up to our responsibilities. Forgetting that the word responsibility, we got help. Did we get help? I didn't ask for the help though, see? Older brother in me. Forgetting that the word responsibility means ability to respond. And how can we expand the ability to respond unless we ask for help? I have discovered that older siblings in our world, older in fact and or indeed, so many of us who are church folk, I have discovered that we often live with two little devils, one on each shoulder. When we wake up in the morning, one devil says, "It's all up to me." And the other says, "Am I enough? Is there enough? It's all up to me. Is there enough?" Taken together, these two messages pose quite the dilemma. Two messages that responsible non-prodigals sometimes tote around with them. And then along in our story come today two prodigals. Prodigal meaning wastefully extravagant. A father and a younger son acting as if there's always enough. A prodigal, wastefully extravagant father nibbling on the ear and running his fingers through the hair of his prodigal son, each exuding waste in their wake. Unlike the older son in our story today, who is not wasteful, the one who says to himself, "It's all up to me. And is there enough?" His God is zero-sum, transactional, restrictive, full of rules and regulations he steadfastly obeys. The older son, the responsible one, the righteous one, no need to be the repentant one, God forbid. Who needs to receive such wasteful extravagance of forgiveness? For what is there to be forgiven? And if we who are the older, responsible ones have little in us to be forgiven, how can we learn to forgive? Especially when, all along, we've been like the older son in this story, many of us. Some resentful of the world of mercy all around. And resentful this older son has been. It all began when the younger son asked, no, he demanded that their father give him his share, his younger son's share of the inheritance. And as the older brother knows, such a demand just was not made. For in the ancient Middle East, and in many places to this day there, for a child to even ask for the inheritance before the father died is to wish that the father was dead. And regardless what the father may have felt, the father gives him his share. Imagine what the older brother feels like in this exchange, right? The one charged to uphold the good family name. The family name that not only the younger son, but the father has just shamed, has just disgraced through his prodigal act of grace, has just disgraced through his prodigal act of grace, which only continues when his prodigal son, who so does not deserve it, of course, gets so wastefully and extravagantly served upon his return. How to deal with this resentment, this older sibling. How to forgive this when no one, it seems, is following the family playbook, when no one is living in the honor-shame society with the strict purity code that he is following. When his prodigal father thinks he is doing the right thing, and yet all along he is not doing things right. Or in the end, does this story transcend these brothers? About what each of them does in their own separate and yet uncomprehending ways. This was going to be a complete message about older siblings and how we can relate to that. But the more I looked, the more I could see that this parable probably is more about the prodigal grace of the Father, who, if you notice, responds in the same way to both sons. For the father does not defend his younger one, nor does he berate or censor the older one. In both responses, the father turns attention to his own love and bounty. His own love and bounty that responds to the same way to their lostness. Lost the prodigal on his way, lost the older son in his way. A God who responds the same to our lostness, with particular extravagance for one and with a reminder of that extravagance for the other. A God who forgives abundantly and alike. The irresponsible and the resentful, the feckless and the faithful, the spender and the saver, the sinner and the Pharisees, for whom this story was originally intended. The Pharisee, the church reformers, good people all, and as most scholars agree, Jesus was probably one of them. You know how we save our hardest words for those who are our own? Here we have it. Last week we heard Jesus' teachings on the importance of our spiritual practice of forgiveness. Forgiving 70 times 7 as our anthem today reaffirmed. We heard how forgiveness for the mature is not a series of one-offs, but a way of living, a way of being in the world. More about attunement than atonement. Being attuned to the chords of God's mercy, our spiritual practice of forgiveness. Today is more about the model for that forgiveness, God's practice of forgiveness. How God is and how has been spiritually practicing that forgiveness on all of us all along. So much so that forgiveness, that mercy defines God's attitude more than it describes any singular act. It defines more than it describes. It's an attitude more than a singular act. A great model for us all. For forgiveness is not about transactions. Just you or me or my sin or yours. Forgiveness is about every time God's active, searching, stretching love, healing love finds us when we are lost and calls us back home, lost along our way or lost in our ways. Calling each of us home physically, spiritually, does not mean there is more for one sibling and more for the other. It means there is enough, and that it's not all up to me. Enough wine, enough feasting, enough music, enough dancing, enough people here at worship. It's enough, a bigger party than ever. It is an attitude. It is enough. For in finding the lost, all of us, physically, spiritually, there is no homelessness with God. There is only regardless. No homelessness, only regardless. A model for us all. 2 weeks ago, I was privileged to join several colleagues, black and white, on a civil rights pilgrimage to Georgia and Alabama, ably organized by our parish associate, the Reverend Pat Jackson, who we saw a couple of moments ago. On the second day of our pilgrimage, we made our way from the King Center in Atlanta to Birmingham and the 16th Street Baptist Church that we see here. Some of you may have heard of or know about the 16th Street Baptist Church. That's the all-black congregation in the city of Birmingham, where 3 weeks following the March on Washington here, 3 weeks later, 15 sticks of dynamite equipped with a timer were carefully laid in the basement. Time to explode as the worship hour was about to begin. You see a tour guide there pointing to where the bomb blew. Four girls were changing into their choir robes in the basement area when the bomb set off. 4 girls who never made it upstairs. Now, we toured the site. It's a holy place commemorating this most unholy act. And writ large in this holy place, near where the sticks of the dynamite were laying, are found the 4 words of the Sunday school lesson that the girls had just studied. That the girls had just studied. Lost are we, God's children who come, and lost are we, God's children who go. Prodigal ones lost on their way, older ones lost in their ways, and too many children lost in war's way. Even when bombs explode and children die, in Birmingham, in Israel, and especially now in the Gaza Strip of 2 million incomprehensibly suffering human beings, even when bombs explode and children die, God's love is abundant. And it never ceases. Never ceases even to forgive. Never ceases especially to forgive. Not until all the lost have come home. Thanks be to God.